Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chantel and today I'm going to be doing my bi-weekly wrap-up video. So this is the video that I do every 2 weeks where I wrap up what I've been reading and occasionally what I've been watching if I think that would be interesting or relevant to all of you. So this week I do have a little bit more to talk about than I did last time I did a bi-weekly wrap-up because I have been reading a little bit faster pace the last couple of weeks. So I finished 5 books in the last 2 weeks, and so I do have a little bit more to talk about this time, which is great. So I'm going to do that. The first book I'm going to talk about is The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, which I finished, and I loved it. I thought it was excellent. I do think that it probably says something about my taste in books, that 2 of my favorite reads this year have both been historical horror novels with an intergenerational through line, multiple timelines, and a kind of fresh new take on a monster that everybody is very familiar with. And yeah, so we'll be seeing both of these books, The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia and The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, probably in my my 2025 wrap-up video as some of my favorite books that I've read this year because they're both really good books. I think I might like The Bewitching more even than I liked Mexican Gothic, which is really saying something because I really liked Mexican Gothic. But yeah, this one it's very witchy. It combines elements of sort of Mexican folklore with the classic kind of New England witchcrafty kind of folklore that many of us in America are very familiar with. And it does so in really interesting ways and through the lens of some very fascinating characters, very flawed characters who are, struggling in different ways with different aspects of their lives, particularly with things like their gender. All 3 of our main POV characters are women who are who feel constrained in various ways by the societies in which they live, and they're trying to figure out how to live their best lives as women in societies that are telling them that there are only certain specific things that they as women can and should be doing. And it's a very interesting time, and I had a blast with it. It was great. So that was The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And then after I finished that book, I realized that I needed to get back to some of my physical TBR reads, and especially some of the reads for my 4th quarter TBR that I did a couple months ago. The 10 books that I pulled from my TBR jar. So I tried to get back to that a little bit. So the first one that I did was Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. So this is the second James Baldwin novel that I have read. And this is not a book that I can easily say that I liked. It is an amazing book. It is a book that I'm very glad to have read. It is not a book that I will be looking to reread again anytime soon. It is particularly, I would say, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching. It is a difficult read. It is not a fun read. It is not a lighthearted read, but it's a very good book. If you're not familiar, Giovanni's Room is a groundbreaking story of a queer man living in France who has a love affair with a man called Giovanni, and it goes south quite quickly. There's a lot more going on here. There's a lot about death. There's a lot about life. There's a lot about sexuality and the things that we do to protect ourselves from a society that we know would hate us. And the way that it can manifest itself in deep-seated self-loathing, and the way that that self-loathing can then be projected outwards onto other people is just incredibly heart-wrenching, I think. So yeah, this was an incredible read. Not one that I'm likely to want to repeat anytime soon, but I am James Baldwin's a brilliant writer, and I definitely want to dive into more of his writing in 2026. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be hard for me to get the 2026 thing down, but yes, that's Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. And then I went to another classic that I've been meaning to read for a while, and that is The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a classic science fiction narrative about an anarchist utopia that has spun off from a deeply capitalist society, and a member of this anarchist society, after well over a century of being separated, he goes back to the capitalist homeworld. As a physicist, he's working on a big theory, and his own people basically have no interest in the things that he's doing, but the capitalists definitely do, and so he returns to the homeworld, basically. And there's a lot of political things going on here. This is very much a sort of thought experiment. It's very much a Cold War era thought experiment. So like the two main nations on the home planet, one of them is a deeply capitalist, quote unquote, democratic society, and the other is essentially a communist authoritarian state. This Shevik, our main character, this physicist anarchist, finds himself sort of caught in the middle of this weird political situation on the homeworld, while he is attempting to sort of build bridges and tear down walls, and he wants to, you know, have more free exchange of ideas, basically, between the different worlds. And it's a very interesting book. I enjoyed it a lot. I think that Shevik is a very poignant character in a lot of ways. He's often very isolated. He often feels very lonely, both in his own home, because he's such an extraordinary individual, right? The thought experiment here is sort of like, if you have this sort of completely flat, hierarchy-free, anarchist society with no structures at all, no institutions really, how does such a society deal with an exceptional person, right? Because you're still going to have people who are born who are particularly exceptional in one way or another, and how does a society like that deal with people like that, and is it even a good society for a person like that? And you know, he feels very sort of isolated and alone even on his own home world, and the allure of the deeply unequal capitalist society that he visits, that he goes to, is very tempting. It's very seductive, sometimes in very literal ways, but he also very quickly comes to see the sort of the fissures and the cracks in that society as well. And so it's a really interesting book. I love Le Guin's writing. I love her thought process. Le Guin, of course, was herself an anarchist, and so some of this is a sort of a thought experiment as she's putting her own ideology to the test in some ways. And it was a really interesting read. I was thoroughly engaged with it from beginning to end. Le Guin is one of the greats for a reason, and so that's The Dispossessed. I really enjoyed it. And then I grabbed, for a quickie, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams. This is the sequel to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy several times, but I'd never read beyond that. And I picked this up just like at a library sale like last year. So I just read it just for the heck of it, and it was fun. It's one of those books where I think like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy really works on its own, but I don't know that it needed anything else. Like, it didn't need more books in the series, really, and I'm probably not going to read any more of them after this. But this did give us Millie Ways, which is a wonderful sort of place, time, place, whatever. You know, there's some fun character interactions, and I do appreciate the overall message of this book, which ends up sort of being like, you know, the meaning of life, right? We know from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, of course, that the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. The point of this book is to sort of figure out what the question is, but that's really the point, is that there really is no question, and that the meaning of life really is what you make of it, and not, you know, something, it's not something discoverable. It really is just about how we make meaning, right? And that, I think, is a good takeaway, I think. But like, again, will I be reading this again? Will I be continuing with the series? No, probably not. But I do enjoy The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy shtick, and it's fun. So that was that. And then the other book that I finished was Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. So that's the second in this bind up of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So this is another sort of classic fantasy. It's a children's fantasy. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed both of these stories. They're fun. Again, I don't necessarily have the same kind of nostalgia for these stories because I'd never read them before. So I didn't grow up with these the way that some people did, but I understand the appeal. The thing that struck me the most, especially as I was reading Through the Looking Glass, is that this story very much follows the kind of logic that the stories that my 7-year-old nephew tells. So it felt very much like a story that a child would tell you, because it's exactly the kind of story that my nephew tells me when he gets into one of his moods and he starts rambling on about things, and he just sort of flits from one scene to the next, and because this happens, and then this happened, and then this happened because this happened, and it's very funny. So yeah, that's my continuation sort of my classic fantasy reading project. And speaking of which, I have begun reading the academic An Introduction to Fantasy by Matthew Sangster. I'm really enjoying this, though it is not maybe necessarily what I was wanting for a first sort of academic dive into the genre. He's very much in a modal kind of description here. What he's doing is he's talking about really what fantasy does and how it operates, and he's pulling he's definitely not working in a chronological way. He's pulling from all different kinds of fantasy, which I think is great. I don't have a problem with it. It's not like a bad thing. I don't think it's bad. It's just maybe like what I was wanting to find was something a little bit more chronological to go along with my reading list. But he's, you know, pulling from not even just fantasy novels, but he's pulling from film and television. He's pulling from video games. He's pulling from anime and manga. Anything that is sort of fantastical is in his. He considers it to be part of this, and yeah, so he's talking very much about what fantasy is doing and how it operates, and that is interesting. And I'm also hoping that it will give me a lot more further reading as well, because this is a pretty recent release, so I'm assuming he should have a lot of sort of you know, further reading kinds of things that I might be able to dive into of earlier works that may be more chronological. But yeah, so I've just started reading. I'm only maybe a quarter of the way through. But yeah, this has been a really good time as well. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be reading next. I should really dive into Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I've been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and I should just get to it. It is on my TBR for the fourth quarter. It's almost December. I should start that. There may be a couple books on my fourth quarter TBR that I don't get to, mostly the library picks. because part of it is my fault, part of it's the library's fault. So part of it is my fault for not putting a hold in sooner on the Raven Scholar. I didn't get a hold in soon enough, and it's like a 20-week wait on that book, so I don't think I'm going to get to it this year. But that's okay. And the other one that I was looking at, my library's, I can't find it on my library's website or anything, so I'm probably just going to have to nix that and find something else. But otherwise, I'm relatively well on track for reading the 10 books that I put on my fourth quarter TBR. And of course, in the coming weeks, I'll be doing my sort of plans for 2026, my 2026 reading plans, which, you know, as usual for a new year, I am probably going to be making some changes to things that I do, so hold tight for that, because I want to focus more on my personal projects in 2026, rather than like the Our Fantasy Bingo board, which is fun, but after this year, this will be my second year doing it. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it again next year, just because I want to focus on some other things. So we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, yeah, what have you been reading lately? What are your December reading plans? Again, everything is pretty up in the air for me. I'm just kind of right now looking at my physical TBR and grabbing some books off my physical TBR shelf to read as I feel like it for December. And yeah, so let me know in the comments below what's up, and if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.